Hey, we are live here at Rocco's Pub. This is the Patriotic Dragons radio show, and it is the Millennial Takeover. That means we have all two millennials here in North Georgia, I assume. Isn't that right? And they're both named Steven, ironically.
Extremely ironically.
Yeah, but that's all good. So today it is actually Millennial Takeover, and because of that, I recently saw not too long ago when I was flipping through the channels a WSB special on the rise of the millennials, and so it got me to thinking, where is this group gonna take us? The issues that we have, the political, economic force that we are we we're kind of blocking as far as religion goes. Are we more religious? Are we secular? What have you? So I decided to tackle some of these issues and bring on the one person that might be able to help me out with that. And again, this is Stephen Aaron, and I'm going to take it over right now and give it to Stephen. But before that, I want to talk about some of the sponsors that we have. And of course, we are sitting here at Rocco's Pub. If you have never had their elk burger, let me tell you, Stephen. I don't know if you ever been down here before.
Oh, I've been down here before.
Okay.
They've got good food and good drinks.
All right. Well, let me tell you right now. And Stephen's the Stephen A here across from me is sipping on what is that now?
This is a Drafty Kilt. It's a really good dark Scottish beer.
See, I'm not a beer connoisseur, but I can tell you right now, if it flows well here, which it certainly does, by all intents and purposes, it must be good.
Well, and the thing about it is they carry a lot of good local stuff produced here in Georgia. They've got hard cider made up at Mercier's Orchard in Blue Ridge, Georgia. Then they have Red Hare and a few other types of beers that are made throughout the state, mostly in Marietta, Gwinnett County, places like that. But
look at that.
They've got some pretty good stuff.
Steve knows more than I do about some of this stuff. Okay.
Well, it's business.
He's absolutely right. Let's actually talk about a little background about you, where you came from, what you're into, all that good jazz.
Well, I have to admit, I'm a little. I hope I don't get called a traitor for being on a radio show nicknamed the Patriotic Dragon. Coming from Gilmer County, anything associated with dragons is seen as completely evil.
That's not necessarily true. We'll let you have a reprieve for one evening, you bobcat.
But hey, at least we can agree on one thing: the Fannin Rebels stink.
Amen. Amen.
But no, my name is Stephen Aaron. I've been involved in politics for 11 years now. Being a millennial, I'm 25 years old, so you can do the math. I've been involved in this for way longer than I should have been. I come from a farm family up in Gilmer County. We've got an apple orchard. We used to have chicken houses, but we unfortunately lost those during the economic downturn. I went to Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College. I've got an associate's degree in political science and a bachelor's degree in business and economic development. And I currently hold a leadership role in the Georgia Republican Party, and I'm a political junkie, I guess is the best way to put it. So when I'm not doing politics, I'm working my rear end off in the hot sun on the farm.
Awesome. Very cool. So let's dive right into it a little more. Like we were talking about before, I had just a lot of burning questions behind what the millennial generation is, where it's going. We're going to kind of prophetize, so to speak, the future of the turning tide. I really believe that the millennial generation is a new wave, if you will, of new and different ideas, and that's almost a given. But what kind of ideas are these going to have? So tonight I've broken it up into three parts, and Stephen, this may or may not be the first time you've seen this, but we're going to kind of focus a little bit on education of the millennials, job marketing, and then the community, and get into all the nuances that has to offer. So let's kind of begin by just describing what millennials are. If you're unfamiliar with this, the age bracket would be from 1987, if I'm not mistaken, to 1997. So do the math on that. So if I'm correct on that. Excuse me one second. By the way, the water here is really good too. I didn't know if you knew that. Yeah.
Spring water, I'm sure.
That's right. I'm telling you, there's mountain water up here in North Georgia, man. It's something in it.
Yeah, lots of iron and radium.
Well, at least it's not Flint, Michigan water.
Hey, at least we got Republican control here, and we don't have to worry about the water.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So that is a millennial generation in a nutshell, as far as the timeline, how you have to fall in goes to be a millennial. But the other thing is that we are now the largest generation, believe it or not. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there that the baby boomers are the largest generation, and
well, as far as sheer population, we're the largest generation. But that's because the baby boomers had so many children. Now, our parents went from having, 7 or 8 brothers and sisters down to having an average of 2.5 to 3 kids. So you've got just a little bit more multiplication there, but not much. And the reason we are the largest generation is because our parents had averaging around 2 kids instead of having the larger families that they had during the baby boomers. But we do outnumber them now.
And that is true, and we'll actually dive into that a little more. And we are actually the largest in the job force too. Let me speak on that a little more. Let's pivot a little bit, getting away from the job market and getting away from average population size and into education. So as I was watching this telecast the other night on television, they were talking about how education impacts our generation. We may be the largest generation. We may have a lot of numbers as far as the job market goes, but as far as education goes, we also consume the largest number of student debts. And let me quickly give you some ideas upon that. Where is my stuff here?
While he's looking for his numbers, I'm just going to go ahead and say that, as a millennial here, I got out at the lower end of the spectrum with the amount of debt that I had for my education. I've got roughly $20,000 in debt for 4 years of college. And a lot of people see education as a right, whereas I see those loans as an investment in my future. And the dividends will start paying as I get further into the job market with my degree, and hopefully get some economic development positions further close to home. And I think Steven's found his data.
Yeah, so, and he's got Stephen A has got a point. I think that's what we're going to do tonight. We're just going to do Stephen A, Stephen H.
Sure,
that
sounds good.
Okay, cool. So Stephen A is got a point in the fact that I think we have been trained more or less on trying to rediscover or discover our educational passions. Now that no longer does that mean that one goes out and gets an associate's and then quits. More and more, because we are not only, again, the largest in populational size, the largest in job size, but we are the most educated of class too.
Well, I would use the term educated in quotation marks.
And we're going to get into that later, so hold that thought. Hold that thought. So, just to give you a quick rundown, the class of class of actually 2016 has now an average debt of roughly around $37,000. Now, of course, that doesn't apply to necessarily the millennial generation, but you're talking about thousands of dollars, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars, for some individuals going off and getting their master's and their doctorate. Now, Stephen, you hinted on it earlier about educated we are. Education we are here, and for us out there, I am an owl, by the way. what is?
I am a golden stallion.
Golden Stallion. That's what that is down in ABAC, huh?
Mhm.
Okay. So just in case you're wondering here, now I guess my question is with all of this that we have going for us, because we are the most educated generation, are we really that more smart?
I honestly wouldn't say that we're more intelligent than the previous generation. I mean, a lot of it depends on the drive of the individual as to whether they want to continually educate themselves. I have to say that my parents brought me up in a way that, you know, I got in trouble for in high school, not for doing anything bad, but because I would be reading books in class when I wasn't supposed to be over different
You
subjects.
remind me a lot of my sister. I'll go into that subject
Yeah,
later on.
but I mean, it all goes to that individual drive. Now, I'm going to say that I feel fairly fortunate that I attended a smaller college where the professors actually get paid less than your average high school teacher does. They're not there for the money. They're there because they enjoy actually helping their students learn. They're not there to fill a quota. They're not there to make a six-figure salary. They're there to actually educate people. And you've got a few colleges like that around, and I consider them hidden gems. I think Dalton State's another one of those that's a hidden gem. It's a small enough school where they can actually concentrate more on truly educating people. But what I've seen, especially in my interactions with people that go to larger schools such as UGA, and just as a personal disclaimer, I'm not a very big fan of UGA anyways, but
you got to stop right there. So if it's not UGA, what is it?
What do you mean, what is it?
Well, I mean, if you're not a Dogs fan, then are you an Auburn fan? Are you a...
I'm actually not an SEC fan whatsoever.
Oh, wait, that's right. Okay. Different discussion for a different day.
Different discussion for a different day. But what you see in a lot of these colleges and a lot of these universities is they're making quotas, and it doesn't just start in the college. It actually starts in the high schools. I graduated from Gilmer County High School in 2009, and one of the things from the time I was a freshman in high school till the day I graduated is they were always pushing college. You need to go to college. You have to go to college if you want to get a good job, if you want to be successful. And there were a lot of people that I went to school with that definitely didn't need to go to college. People that got scholarships to go to colleges that didn't need to go to colleges. Meanwhile, if some of these same people had gone to what was then Appalachian Technical College, I don't know what it's called now. Is it Chattahoochee Tech?
Chattahoochee Tech.
Yeah, Chattahoochee Tech.
Yep.
If they would have gone there, got their welding certificate, they would have a six-figure salary by now from welding because, welders get paid that good salary for a trade that's honestly very difficult to master because it's a trade that's an art as well as being able to stick two pieces of metal together and make them hold for years and years. So a lot of it just goes back to this push to get everyone in college and get everyone a higher education. But I saw this at ABAC, but a third of the freshmen coming in at ABAC had to take either remedial English or remedial math courses, which means they had to take between 3 and 4 credit hours of classes to make up for the stuff that they didn't get taught in high school. It means that they were not prepared for college whatsoever. And there were people that I graduated from high school with that went with me to ABAC that had to take those remedial courses. And so what's going on is we're decreasing the quality of education.
Dumbing it down.
Extremely dumbing it down. I mean, there were some of my classes in college, some of my history classes, communications, computer applications, things like that, where I basically finished the class in the first 2 weeks. I just had to show up and take the tests. I already knew all the material that was going to be covered in the class, and very few professors went further in depth. And so we've got, I'm going to call it a bloated college degree because we're pushing so many people to get bachelor's degrees. And essentially what we're moving towards is a system where the associate's degrees are already worthless. but we're moving towards a system where bachelor's degrees are going to be worthless as worthless as a high school diploma essentially is.
I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Honestly, in order to get a high school diploma now, no matter which state you live in, as long as you have a pulse, they will make sure you graduate from high school if you show up.
Yeah, and to finish out the statement, I would certainly agree with a ton of that information, especially the fact that once whatever the value that an associate's degree had is no longer the case. And I think that only is illustrated by the fact that we have an administration now who's saying openly and clearly that an associate should be not only there, but it should be free. And so whatever value that you once had for an associate is again no longer the case. And then you also, which I don't think a lot of people realize, is that you dilute everything else down the line. You dilute the bachelor's, you dilute the master's, you dilute everything else, and thus you get yourself into a pickle almost of if you're a college or even a high school even, is what kind of education are you offering? What kind of curriculum do you have? Is it rigorous or not? That kind of stuff. And so it's very important to be able to discern ourselves with this idea of what is free, what should be free, which in I think both cases here we don't agree that education should be at all in that category.
Not at all.
And what should be truly earned, and that does include a financial aspect of it, without a doubt.
But I mean, as far as education goes, a lot, and I blame this a lot on the people that devise the curriculum and even the teachers that teach it, especially when it comes to things like economics. You wouldn't think that theories in regards to economics could help people in other areas of their life. And, even the most basic theories of economics, such as supply and demand. And with college degrees, we are seriously running into a supply-demand issue. The supply of people with college degrees has gotten so high that the demand is actually lessening. So there are people out there with, it depends on the field that they get it in. Bachelor's degrees in scientific fields, physics, biology, that sort of thing. There's a constant demand for those, especially in the medical field.
So you're telling me my art history degree won't?
Your history degree is completely and utterly worth less than the amount of paper that it is printed on.
By the way, I'm a political science major, if you're just wondering, which is just about as worthless.
But. And the other thing and this ties into an even larger segment that I think we're going to get into later, but the lack of education on philosophy, on belief systems, on how our country got to be at the point where it is now, how the founders got to be at the point that they were at when they wrote our Constitution. And honestly, this is one of the biggest things I learned in college when I was in the political science program. I had all the professors in the political science program at ABAC are top notch, and one of them essentially forced the administration at ABAC to have a political philosophy course, and I actually learned more out of that class than I did anything else in college. And what we did is every week we would study a new philosopher and their relation to or their impact on the founders of the country. And these are people that are prominently displayed in Thomas Jefferson's library, people like Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Thomas Hobbes, Rousseau, and even Machiavelli to some people's surprise.
Oh man!
But I mean,
you're bringing me back to a time I really enjoyed it.
But I mean, the point there is that people cannot truly be educated without understanding the history of where we've come from and how these ideas developed over time. And to me, that's something that should be the very core of education. Prior to the nationalization of education in the 1900s, philosophy was a core concept of education. And to me, it's one of the reasons why we've started to drift in an area where our education is less about being educated and more about meeting quotas and standards and making sure we get more people through the doors than providing a quality education to those that are there.
And let me touch on that. Let me carry it over because I really believe that we have a pretty good college system thus far. But what isn't really good is our K through 12. And so I was looking up some stats. In fact, the first time I heard the stat was from a professor from a small teaching school at the time called Gainesville State University, and I really do applaud the faculty and staff that are there because that same sentiment that you talked about earlier about the teachers really wanting to be there and teach, not just for research purposes, but to teach. It goes back to the smaller classroom sizes and having that teacher who really had a passion to do exactly that, to teach.
Well, I mean, and, just to touch on that, at UGA you require an appointment to go see your professor. You could just be in the same building as your professor at some of these schools and walk in and say, hey, just wanted to check in and see how you were, have a conversation, maybe ask you a question about this, and this that we covered in class.
No, exactly, yeah.
I mean, to me, that's a big difference in quality of education, but sorry, continue.
No, without a doubt. But I wanted to extend this conversation to our K through 12 system because it's really lacking, I do feel like, not just in an American sense or in the country sense, but in the world sense. And so what I find remarkable in the conversations that we have nowadays as far as classroom size and how large our districts are and how much money's flowing to the districts from the federal government and that kind of thing. And I get back to this one little stat that I love to throw out there is that in 1920 we had over 250,000 different schools. Today, or in actually the stat, let me back up with that. The stat actually ends in 2009. In 2009, in current standards, we have a little shy of 150,000. And I think it goes back to this idea of consolidation. This idea that we can fix our economic issues, especially at the local level, with consolidation. In other words, we've got two school districts. Why have that? We'll just consolidate. It seems right on paper for the most part, I think. But then when you get right down to it, if you go down to the Roswell or Johns Creek area and you look at the schools that they're building, they're no longer buildings. They're humongous campuses, and we're funneling hundreds and millions of dollars into these campuses.
The largest school, if I remember this data correctly, in Georgia is in Gwinnett County. And they have, I believe it was 6,500 students the last time I checked. That's more students in their high school than went to my college in any given year.
Yeah.
And, just touching on the 1921 statistic, a lot of the schools, especially back in the early 1900s and even back into the 1800s, were ran by members of the community. Now, being the history buff that I am and my family having lived in this area of the state for so long, I have some very, very old school books that have been passed down in my family from generation to generation. I've got some that date back as late as the 1850s and some as early as the 1930s. But these, you've got kids that were in 7th grade, they called them readers back then, but your average 7th grade reader back then was teaching a child complex algebra using baskets of apples and bushels of corn. And, to me, just reading through these, not even studying them in depth, the standards for education in the early part of the century and in the late part of the 1800s were so much higher than the standards we have today. Now, in the 1800s, if you had an 8th grade education, you were pretty well set for life. If you went to 12th grade and on to college, you were almost guaranteed to be some of the wealthiest people in your community, if not some of the wealthiest people in your state.
I'll never forget my professor reading to us some of the lines out of I believe it was a 5th grader's paper. And when he read it, he wanted us to figure, he didn't tell us at the time how old she was or what grade she was in, but he wanted us to go around and kind of get an idea of what grade we thought she was in. I don't think there was an entire person in that entire classroom that didn't think that she had more than a year of college left. I mean, we were all thinking, oh, she had to be like a junior or senior in college. No, this is a fifth grader. A fifth grader was writing this paper. And it goes back to the curriculum, how rigorous it was for a lot of those kids. And it just it kind of grinds my gears that we're not taking some of this with us. We're diluting the education system that we have, which was once such a fantastic system, and now there is no more. There is no more associate's degree. The bachelor's that you and I have is the reason why we're thinking about going to get a master's and a doctorate. And we're told that these things are good, but yet I'm still of the belief that I want my fruits of my labor to come home to the education that I have put in thus far before I start shelling out more money for things that I may or may not need. And I just get your ideas on it. What do you think?
Oh,
and then by the way, we gotta wrap this up, and I want to move on to job markets.
And I mean, when I was a senior in college, they told me, oh, you'll have a job coming right out of college. There'll be people lining up to want to see your resume and hire you and blah, 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 blah. You send out hundreds of copies of your resume and you get maybe 2 bites. And the only thing that was essentially my saving grace coming out of college was the fact that I was hired on to run a political campaign, which essentially was nothing related to the degree that I had just gotten. And, that sort of transitioned me into the area where I am now. I still have my degree in economic development, but every time I've placed an application for being a executive director of an economic development authority, a downtown development authority, etc., I get the same response of, you are too young, you do not have enough experience in the field. I honestly believed my professor when he told me this, because he had worked in the economic development arena for over 30 years. He said that the education that we got was essentially his labors over 30 years and things he had to learn in economic development over time, and that we were actually going into the economic development field with essentially 30 years experience. But unfortunately, people don't see it that way when they see what your birth date is.
And it's a great segue, because I want to be able to talk about this idea between what is a job and what is a career. For my personal self, my parents worked for a large company for over 30 years, and were able to get past things like divestitures and thousands of employee layoffs at a time, and strikes and unions and all of this. They were able to push it aside and have these elongated careers that were lucrative for my family, but we no longer are seeing that. I think we're seeing more and more of 1099s. I'm seeing more and more of individuals that are subcontractors. No longer do you work for one particular company. You work for a whole slew of them, and you get 5 different paychecks from them, or you're working multiple jobs. And that, I think that's the kind of thing that you're seeing more and more often. Plus, on top of that, I can, as I do my own travels through my own job, I can go down and I can see a lot of help wanted signs. But they don't say any. But the types of jobs that are out there, they're not gearing themselves to anybody who's looking for a career. And I think that's hard for somebody like me. I don't know about yourself, but someone who's not looking to stick in a place for a year or 6 months at a time. They're looking for a place to be able to be there 20, 30 years, and bring about really good ideas to a company, and bring a sense of wealth. Not only wealth as in the monetary sense, but in the wealth as in your personal sense of who I am, my identity, all that good jazz. And it's that whole dream seems to be fading more and more as we just talked about here with the educational segment of the show.
Well, I mean, and going from that, I mean, after the campaign that I was working on finished, I've spent close to 2 years looking for another job, and I finally just had to say, forget it. I've got a perfectly good farm here. I can modernize it, bring it into the 21st century, do some agritourism with it, and end up making just as much money or more money as I could have if I hadn't even gone to college at all.
By the way, you and I got to pitch you later on about being a sponsor for Aaron's Farm on the radio show. Just
Well, we
saying.
don't open till August, so you'll have to wait until then.
By the way, I have had their apples there, and they are delicious. Trust me, they're really good. So if anybody, I will do this one little personal bit out there. If anyone ever goes up to LJ and looking for apples, it's Aaron's Apples is the place to be. So.
We're one of the oldest operating orchards in Gilmer County.
And they're not the biggest, and that's a good thing, I think. The fact that you don't go there and you have to stand in line and wait for or watch how these kids these mommyless kids run around you all over the place and are just kicking and screaming. It's irritating to me. So.
Well, we're not a supermarket. We're a family farm that sells our product.
And that's what I love. So. But to dive a little more into the job market, I mean, we're talking about even in today's time, the job market has a little over 7% occupied by the millennials. But that's still higher than pre-recession numbers.
Yes.
In 2007, we were looking just above 6%. If you dive into those numbers even more, you look at the minority levels and the demographics that those show, you'll see even worse numbers. And so I see here.
Well, at the height of the recession, I believe it was 25%, and this is 2009, 2010. At the height of the recession, 25% of the people between age 30 and 18 were unemployed and could not find work at all. And a lot of this really, to me, stems from a little bit of demagoguery that we get in, throwing a little vine back to education. But when I was in high school, the teachers always told us, you don't want to flip burgers for the rest of your life. You don't want to dig ditches. You don't want to be a farmer. You don't want to be out in the hot sun all day, do you? So a lot of it does go back to this demagoguery that we've had against manual labor, against, doing jobs that may be dirty and sweaty and uncomfortable. But at the same time, that work actually builds good character and can actually bring home a decent amount of money.
I think one of the richest individuals that I know personally was a heavy machinery operator, and because of this conservative idea that he had personally within himself, he was able to not only build a business but to be able to pass on those same ideals to his kids and his grandkids, and offer them a nice living. So.
But I mean, it's even things as simple as having a 16-year-old having a part-time job at a burger joint, or once you get to be 21, getting your CDL and spending a few years driving trucks around the country. It's things like that work experience that lays the foundation for people to jump into these better careers. And, like I said, there are so many negative stereotypes that come with being a farmer, being a manual laborer, with being someone that works in fast food, and even with people that drive trucks or operate heavy machinery, or even mechanics that work with their hands all day. You have to be, the stereotype out there is those people are generally uneducated, and they don't have any desire to become more educated. They just want to work with their hands, and they're too dumb to realize otherwise. And I'm sure you've seen some of that too.
Oh no, absolutely. In fact, to coattail on this a little more, I am appalled at the fact that you can have a liberal that'll go out there and talk about how we need how this group needs to be better this and better that, and there's nothing to really satisfy anyone's need to say, what I'm doing is actually worth something. I don't need to necessarily have an education to do XYZ that I'm doing. Maybe it was my family trade. Maybe all I need is an associate's or
even just a high
trade
school
degree.
diploma.
Correct. Yeah. So much, I think, has been lost in the identity of that you need to do something else or you need a higher education, and there's not a sense of gratification to who I already am and what I can bring to the table. And we have this culture that now says, but you need to be trained in something, and you need not just be trained, but you need to be educated at a college level. You talked about this before, but I again, there's, especially from the left, I don't think there's this self-love. I think it's got to come from a higher power. And the higher power in this case is government.
Yeah. And, just as an illustration, since I'm heavily tied in with agriculture, the citizens of the United States, on average, spend about 10% of their yearly income on food, right? Now, there is a movement in the left, or there was, and I believe there still is, but there was this thing of don't let your children grow up to be farmers. And they aren't doing it as much now as they were in the early 2000s, but we are one of the very few countries in this world where people spend less than 20% of their average annual income on food products. Now, that includes fast food meals, that includes groceries that you get from the grocery stores, and a lot of that comes from people that have been in this trade for ages. I mean, the average age of a farmer in the United States is 56 years old. And younger ones really aren't taking over that mantle because they've gone off and they've got their education. And so on top of the fact that liberals have gone after and decided to start attacking what they call factory farming, people that'll have 2,000 or 3,000 acres worth of, say, wheat or barley, and they manage to raise it all in one summer and ship it off to market. Or like we used to have chicken houses. You've got a building that's on average about 50 feet by 400 feet, and you can fit 20,000 chickens into it. And, I honestly hated the chicken houses. They were a pain in my rear. But whenever I would work in them, even though I didn't enjoy it, there was still a sense of pride when I came home at the end of the day, because I knew that when I sold that flock, I would be able to feed a family of 5, let every person in that family have 1 chicken for every meal a day for 5 years, if they chose to.
That's awesome.
But and that's just from 1 8-week period of growing a flock.
That's really awesome.
and it didn't take that much education. My dad spent a couple of years down at ABAC, never got a degree, came home, got married, built his chicken houses. And it's just the fact that in the job market, people in our generation have essentially lost respect for getting out there and doing the hard labor stuff. And it makes it more difficult to get into careers because they want to be able to jump in as a mid-level executive, having their college degree, climb all the way up to the top from being a mid-level executive, and retire at the age of 40 with $10 million in the bank for them to live the rest of their life on.
We have a society that says that jobs are not there. The way they're structuring even the entry level jobs, it's not the way it once was. If you take the auto industry, for example, no longer do the unions get the kind of lucrative deals that they once did, and it's our generation, I truly believe, that's paying the price for that. But it's not that same reciprocal idea is rippled upon well beyond just the auto industry. It goes to every industry at that point.
And there's a picture that's making its rounds on Facebook and other places that I've seen, and I have to laugh at it because it's kind of true. But it's a picture of 2 executives interviewing a younger person, and they're handing them their resume. And at the top it says, "Yes, we're looking for someone under the age of 25 with 15 years work experience and a master's degree." And you kind of chuckle because it sounds absurd, but once you actually get out there in the job market, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for these unrealistic standards for people that are in the millennial age bracket.
Yeah.
And it's so hard for people to get into any career because of how competitive they're making it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
you've got to also take into account the mentality and it's not all of us. Especially here in Georgia, it is not all of us. But there are a lot of people in our age bracket that feel like they deserve for things to just be handed to them, especially jobs and careers, that they shouldn't have to work for it.
And so we've talked a lot about what education is. We've talked a lot about what a job is to a millennial. But there's also a different aspect to it, and I think that's community. And you get into this idea of what family is. I think we mentioned a little bit about before about that there's a higher power now, and it's not God, it's government. That there's a lot of different variables now that enter into challenging the family ideology. The sexual movement, I think, is one, and I just don't want to call it the heterosexual movement or the homosexual movement. I want to give it a more broader term, because what is happening is that we have an entire generation of individuals that are coming up, and it seems to be a split in cultures in some cases, of single mothers that that understand having a child not only out of wedlock, but never introducing a man into the household. I think a lot of people would agree with that if you're a conservative, but not only that, but there's a challenge again from our churches to our government and what it means. And what I mean by that is that in the 1920s, you could go and your Department of Labor was at your local church. No longer is that the case. So your Department of Labor lies within the government. So you have, again, this ideology of unwedlock mothers having kids and reciprocated over and over and over and over again. But then you have a different ideology that's almost completely different, and it's strange in a way. But if you're like me in my household, you're almost holding off on having kids. And you talked about that before, about having our generation having less and less kids, and the birth rate is actually dropping extremely. But in the sense to that, you have all of these variables coming together. You have a lesser ideology of church implemented into the community. You have bigger governments, which say no longer do you need a church, you need government to be in your lives. And because I think at the same time that there's this idea of unrealistic expectations from the job market, you have an entire set of individuals like myself who are out there, newlyweds, who want to hold off on getting married or want to hold off on having kids. Because we literally, my wife and I waited as long as we could to get finished through school, just because we didn't want to have that burden. And our philosophy, she literally wrote it on the mirror, was no marriage, no future without education, which the future in our case was marriage. And it's almost delaying what nature should have in its course. But that was a choice that we had. So with all of this given, give me some feedback, Stephen, on what you think real quick.
Well,
I know I threw a lot at you. So
well, yeah, you did throw a lot at me, but a lot of it goes back to that one of those political science professors that I had in college. At the beginning of our political philosophy course, he made us watch this really, really stupid movie. But unfortunately, the movie does bring up a very valid point. For those of you that may have never seen it, I'm going to go ahead and tell you it is an adult film. Do not watch it with your children. There is a lot of profanity in it. But if you've never seen the movie Idiocracy,
I was about to say, are you actually speaking about a Trump rally?
No, I
Very
don't.
long and
I
vulgar.
cannot. I think that the Republican Party's chosen its nominee, and we'll have to go from there. But the movie is called Idiocracy, and just to give you the basic concept of this movie, a guy decides, this really low intelligence gentleman decides that he can't make money any other way, so he decides to sell his body to science. And what they do is they put him in a cryo freezing chamber, and
Very Orwellian here.
yeah, extremely Orwellian. And then the department gets shut down, and they forget about him. Well, a few hundred years later, while they're tearing the building down, they wake him up. And what it has turned out is that the intelligent people in society, those that are concerned about the future of the country and the world, have stopped having children because they were so concerned about the future, and because they were also concerned about their individual finances. But that made it to where the people that weren't as intelligent were the ones that were producing all the children. So you run into this society where the way the president is determined is who wins the monster truck rally.
I love it when you can add a monster truck rally into a political conversation. This just got interesting, folks.
Well, and they try and water all their crops with Gatorade instead of water. And for those of you that may be chemistry buffs out there, Gatorade and waters like it have electrolytes in it.
I watched enough Honey Boo Boo. I know.
But the electrolytes are salts in the soil, and they'll actually prevent crops from growing after a certain amount of time. So when this guy wakes up out of the cryo chamber, he's actually the most intelligent man in the world. You'll just have to go and watch it. It's funny. It'll make you lose a few points off your IQ, but it does illustrate.
So what is this movie again?
It's called Idiocracy.
Okay, all right.
And
Definitely not a PG thing.
Definitely not a PG thing.
After 11 o'clock.
Yeah,
guys.
But you did throw a lot at me as far as other topics are concerned, but
Well,
me at 25, I have made a conscious effort not to seek to get married, seek to date anyone until I know personally I'm financially secure and that I have all of my house in order before I bring someone else into it.
And let me stay on that a little bit. And I mentioned before about the rise and fall of churches and who replaces the churches. And I truly believe that we are now living in a society that the family ideology, the nucleus of the family, is being attacked. Let me throw some hard data from
at you guys real quick. The baby boomer generation had about, let me see if I can get my numbers correct here. It was about 12 to 12.5% of the people in the baby boomer generation considered themselves atheist, agnostic, or non-religious. Right? And then Generation X. Wait, I'm getting my numbers confused, but Generation X, which is the generation immediately preceding millennials, it's 1977 to 1987, if I remember correctly. Those individuals, they're all older. They're starting to have their families. They're pretty well rooted in the economy and in society, and they have about 14% of their generation that is atheist, agnostic, or non-religious. And then you get to the millennials, and unfortunately, the data for millennials is not that great because the last vestiges of millennials are still in high school, and they're not 18 just yet. So we've got another year before all of them are 18. But we've seen between Generation X at 16% and the millennials at least a 4% jump in that atheist, agnostic, and generally non-religious affiliation. So we've gone from 16% to 20% just in 10 years as far as our generation's concerned. And some statisticians and some people that are involved in the Department of Labor, some people that are involved with the census, are predicting it might even go as high as 21 to 22% that are completely unaffiliated with any religious belief whatsoever. So, and I'm not saying this either way is good, bad, or indifferent, but these are some of the facts that we've got to look for politically going forward. And, we see in no matter what society you're in, you're always going to see ebbs and flows in the amount of religiosity in society based upon how things are going in the country, based upon how things are going in the world. And one of the reasons why, personally, I can see uh, an even greater lack in religiosity coming forward is because the world is shrinking so much, and because you've got so many ideologies that are coming together, and you're being able to be more educated about all these different ideologies if you want to. And it essentially presents an information overload.
So are we headed to a place almost like what Japan is facing right now? You think where it's very secular, but at the same time there's no turnover in birth rates, there's a rise in birth rates or increase in birth rates, and we're just kind of secular beings living out our lives and going to our jobs and then coming home and just kind of doing the day-to-day routine. Is that kind of our future?
Well, allow me to say something that isn't necessarily popular amongst conservatives, and especially amongst Republicans. The United States was essentially created as the first secular country in the world, and before you get mad at me for saying that, you have to understand what the term secular means. What it means is that we were the first country in the history of the world to not designate a state religion. We left the choices of religion and morality up to the individual. And to me, that's one of the things that has made us as good of a country as we have had so far. And on countries that we have helped to found, or countries that we have influenced in their ideology and in their constitutions, we have also encouraged this sort of secular idea that we should leave it up to the individual as to what they believe and what they consider to be their morality.
But even then, even back in the day when our founding fathers were putting this country together, or even way before that, there was, I had mine, you had yours, but I believed in something, and a belief in something is very important. I think it goes well beyond even religion in some cases. It goes into who I am as a laborer. It goes into who I am as a father or a mother or an individual in a community, and that's really important. In fact, some of the Pew Research. I love this place to get my stats. They really dive down into culture, and they've given, I guess, even a better sense of what they're targeting beyond this word secular. They call them the nun. There's this whole culture that's the nun. I don't believe in anything, and I even believe the fact, or I was taught in school that a belief in nothing is a belief in something. And if you go back into the Rousseauian, the political philosophers. Only one I can think of right now is Rousseau for some reason. But if you fall into these individuals, or you follow these individuals, you'll find a lot of times that there was this battle between them all, of what is a belief, what isn't a belief, what is religion, what is God, what is not God, all of that good jazz. But now we're not only having that conversation, we've boiled it down to the fact that there is no God or there is a God. And because we've boiled it down to these two questions, there seems to be an impact on families. And I see it more and more coming from the left more than anything. Now, whether we talk about birth rates or sex, drugs, and crime and rock and roll and all that good jazz and how that affects families, the idea is that family values are under attack one way or another. And I take offense to the fact that, or no, that's not the right word. I'm concerned by the fact that there are these variables, whether they're right or wrong, that are an attack on who we are, on our identity. So to go above and beyond that, let me give you an example. So if we're just out here as this kind of non-believing person who believes that or who believes, listen to me, who goes out, has a job, does their job, comes home, and does their routine, but has no core of a family or family identity. I really believe that that's a fault of our culture right now. And we talked about these things earlier, that there's a lack of identity, or a lack of uh, of belief in who I am, self-love, if you will. We talked about that in being a farmer, being a skilled tradesman. And I think this goes back to the idea of, well, let me just focus all my ideology, or all my time and efforts on figuring out who I am, but not figuring out the fact that I'm not in love with myself. And if I can't love myself, then I cannot love anyone else. Now that dives down into this whole idea of church and God and Bible thumping, but I'm telling you right now, I do think these things carry value, and because of that, because of the fact that we aren't acknowledging these things, and not trying to figure out these things and how they came about and what impact they could have, we're suffering the effects of them. What do you say?
Well, allow me to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into what you just said. The very generalized idea of family changes from even different areas in the country. What we see as family here in the South is considered, because we keep track of grandparents and aunts and uncles and great grandparents and great aunts and great uncles, and we the idea of family changes throughout time, and it changes based upon where you're at. So I will agree that that liberals seem to have this disdain for the idea of the structure of the family, but I don't think that it's as long as we don't take the far road, which is essentially by Marxist playbook, to essentially demolish all structures so that we're all the same person and that every man is equal in their slavery to the government, that I think that we'll be fine. But I honestly see going forward that every generation redefines things in society. Every generation has redefined family. I mean, in the two generations previous to ours, we've redefined that family could be a single mother and her children. So that's I would encourage some more self-searching on that as we continue forward, because what a lot of people consider to be family values are family values of generations which are essentially long since past or are already gone.
And to wrap it up, first of all, let me say it's been an awesome having you out on Stephen Aaron. But I know we can sit here all night and talk about trying to solve the world's issues. But it has been a great to have you. I hope you come on again.
Well, if there's an invitation, I probably will.
Well, I think there certainly will be, at least for this millennial here. I'm filling in for Will Bell today, so and I appreciate Will for having me on. Again, it's been great. It's been awesome. Let me shift gears completely though, and talk about a little bit before we wrap it up about some of the events that are coming down the pipeline for the GOP. Let me first make an announcement that our dodgeball tournament is going to be rescheduled. I'm not quite sure what date and time of that just yet, but I know it has been rescheduled. That was slated for this Saturday on the 17th, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. It is now going to be rescheduled. But another event that is coming down the pipeline that you want to be aware of is our 7th annual Tomato Sandwich Fiesta. I don't know why the Fiesta's in there. I think there's also tacos involved. So anyways,
who would want a taco when you've got perfectly good tomato sandwiches?
I'm not a big tomato fan. So
what?
Yeah. But anyways, that event is actually going to be on June 18th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the community center here in Jasper. If you're looking for tickets, seek any one of our GOP individuals out. They are $10. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are again live here at Rocco's Pub, and we say do and farewell. Thank you, Stephen.
You're very welcome, and hopefully I'll talk to you guys again sometime.